Hi, this is Roger, and today I'm talking about the #1 myth about carbohydrate cycling. Carbohydrate cycling has really become popular in the last few years. You have guys going on websites talking about how they do high carb days, low carb days, how it really helps their workout. Got a couple of things to say about carbohydrates. First, what are carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are one of the 3 components of food. Turns out that food is, all of its calories are either in fats, carbohydrates, or proteins. That's it. Fats, carbohydrates, or protein. So if you are low in carbohydrates, it means you're high in fats and or proteins. There's no other way about it. If you're doing a protein-rich diet, that means you're going to be probably low in fat and low in carbohydrates. It's a sort of a zero-sum perspective. So what you've got to do is think about, well, wait a minute, if I'm doing a low carb diet, I'm actually doing a high fat or high protein diet. That's something to keep in mind. Carbohydrates come in 2 kinds. We've got simple carbs and we've got complex carbs to make a point of it. Simple carbs are things like sugars, need to be avoided or used in small quantities at all times. These things send your blood sugar up, they go into your muscles, which is great for athletic performance, but too many of them and they get stored as fat, and that leads to obesity. So we don't really want a lot of simple carbs. Complex carbs, however, are really good for us. They move material through our large intestine. They break down into simple carbs, which can go into our muscles and then into our liver to fuel our activity. So complex carbs, that means soluble fiber, insoluble fiber, as well as starches that are bound with fiber, so they're absorbed and broken down slowly. That's what we want in our diet. Complex carbs, not simple carbs, so avoid the sugar, but carbs themselves aren't bad. Now, to this business about carbohydrate cycling. Turns out the literature has a lot to say about carbohydrate loading and carbohydrate cycling. Turns out that if you decrease the amount of carbohydrates for a few days, you're supposed to build up a carbohydrate hunger. This works a small amount in your muscles, and you can overload. It takes about 2 or 3 days to actually get to the point where you're overloading in carbohydrates in your muscles. That's great, except most guys who are talking about carbohydrate cycling are talking about 1 or 2 days, not 3 days to load in carbohydrates. Then when you've done your carbohydrate cycling, it turns out that your performance isn't going to change. Literature shows that if you're doing high intensity performance, less than 5 minutes in duration, the extra carbohydrate is not helping you at all. Literature also shows that 60 to 90 minutes of moderate activity, that means your whole gym workout, you're running for an hour, you're on your cycle for an hour, hour and a half, the carbohydrate loading is not helping you. Carbohydrate loading seems to have a small effect if your activity lasts longer than 90 minutes. Some of us go to the gym longer than 90 minutes, but most of us do not. Carbohydrate loading is not helping you, the literature says. There is a small effect of carbohydrate loading in 2 places. Some of the studies show that if you're doing a short, high-intensity sprint, you're getting maybe 2 or 3% better performance by carbohydrate loading. In other words, if you run 400 meters, your quarter mile, and you do it in 60 seconds, your carbohydrate load, you're coming in at 59 seconds. If you're a high-powered athlete, that makes a difference. For most of us, we're not even in that range. Second thing is if you've got long endurance, if you're not taking carbohydrates during your performance, yes, the carbohydrate loading can help. But for long-term runners, long-distance cyclists, a lot of those guys are taking carbohydrates during the performance because it turns out that helps endurance even more than carbohydrate loading. So this brings me down to the point. What is the #1 myth about carbohydrate loading? That it will help you. Carbohydrate cycling and loading does not help the ordinary, does not help the beginning athlete. The literature doesn't support it. The danger is, and this is why I'm talking about it, is that if you're lowering your carbohydrates, you're increasing your fat, and fat is a higher calorie food than carbohydrates. You get about 2 to 1 calories to fat compared to carbohydrates. So you're putting yourself in the danger zone for weight gain when you're trying to lose weight. Another big thing you gotta watch for are the sport drink guys. The guys that are in the gym, girls too, and they're drinking the sport drinks all during the performance. Unless you're doing high intensity long term, you're actually just adding extra calories and not really helping. This has been Roger talking about the #1 myth of carbohydrate cycling, and that's that it'll help you. The links to all these studies are below. Have a look at them. Make up your own mind once you see the scientific evidence. Subscribe for more videos. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.